Hi, this is Andy Stewart. Thanks for taking the time to watch this short little video. I'm going to give you a quick overview of ActiveG Nash, which is a workflow tool that allows you to connect up ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS and your Maximo system. And so I'm going to give you just a really quick overview using an example of taking a fire hydrant inspection in Collector for ArcGIS and taking the inspection results and generating work orders in Maximo. Nash is really good at doing things like this, and so I'm going to show you how simple it is, and we're just going to dive in. So what you're looking at right here is Nash. It's a web-based application, and let me just give you a little orientation of how the screen is laid out. In Nash, we have the concept of workspaces, so you can have multiple workspaces to assign to different users, or multiple users, if you will, and you can give different users access to different workspaces so that you've got a nice controlled flow for different elements of your business. In this case, I'm just going to work in this demo hydrants instance or workspace, and I've got one workflow defined here called Hydrant AGOL to MX, and this is a workflow that is using hydrant inspection results to create Maximo work orders. So we'll jump into this workflow in just a sec, but before you even create a workflow, you need to create some connections. And so that's what we've done here is in this workspace, we have a couple of different connections. One is to a feature service that's hosted out on ArcGIS Online. And this is where we're getting our inspection results for the fire hydrants. And then we have Maximo connection set up. This is Maximo's REST API. And that's how we're generating and creating work orders. So once we've defined these two connections, they can now be used in other workflows in this workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this workspace or on this workflow and bring up the different workflow representations that we have. Okay, so there's a lot of boxes here, and that's because the ArcGIS inspection that we're doing has a lot of questions associated with it. So depending on all the questions that are answered, we may have different outcomes, and therefore we want to do different things depending on what those results are going to be. But to make this a little bit simple, you can see that the green on the workflow here these are GIS records. So we've got things that start with I, so like I1, this is input number 1. And then we have things that start with O, which are outputs. So this is output number 3, input number 2, output number 4, etc. So these are all GIS. Everything in blue is Maximo. So we've got output number 1 in Maximo. This is a paint work order. And then output number 2 is just a corrective maintenance work order. And then everything else in the salmon colors are all the cases or switches, depending on what the answers to the user's questions in the inspection are. So let's just double click on the first inspection input, and you'll see that it's using the connection that was defined back on the connections page, and it's using the hydrant inspection layer. And so as you page through here, you can see, or as I scroll, you can see the different fields like bonnets, the bonnet bolts, caps, paint condition, readings, and so forth. And these are the fields that we're going to use to process our results. And then we have a status of waiting that's been defined, and that means that whenever the inspections are created in ArcGIS Online, we're appending them with a status of waiting so that we know when to pick up these records when they're ready to be processed. So after those new inspections are created in waiting status, then we start evaluating the answers that the users provided. So for instance, if we click on this caps option here, you see we've got several different cases, case 1 through 4, and then we have a default. So if the user answered for caps, if their answer is equal to missing, then we're going to create a work order that has a description of missing caps, and we're going to give that work order a priority of 3. If the caps answer is frozen, we're going to give it a description of frozen caps. We're going to give it a priority of 3, and on and on. So you can append as many work order fields as you want here. You can update whatever other records you need or whatever work order fields that you need to. But just to make it simple, again, we're just iterating through the user's answers and then updating Maximo appropriately. The other thing that's happening in this workflow is if paint condition, so here we go, back at input number 1, if paint condition equals poor, then set the work order priority to 3 and create a work order with a description of poor paint condition. So pretty simple and straightforward when you look at it that way. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what this looks like in ArcGIS, or excuse me, in Collector. And so let's bring up Collector. And so you see here I've got a web map that's been published for Collector and a bunch of fire hydrants that need to be inspected. So let's just pick on this one right here, and we'll grab the hydrant out of that. And then if you scroll down, you can see that I have an inspection option that I can add. And so this is a related table that we created in ArcGIS that's related to all the work orders, or excuse me, all of the hydrants. And so this is the record set that contains those questions. This is related to input 1 back in the Nash workflow. So in this use case, we've got a user typing in an employee ID number. We could pick up the user's ID from Collector if we wanted to, but in this case, we've got a different record number that we're capturing. And then we want the user to tell us what color the bonnet is on that fire hydrant. So we'll say it's green. And then our first question is the paint condition good? And we're going to say, no, it's poor. And then let's say that the bonnet bolts are deteriorated, but everything else looks good. And we'll give it a pressure reading. Let's give it a 78. And then I think that should do it. So let's click the submit button up here in the top right corner. Okay, so for this hydrant, hydrant 22-824, we've completed the inspection. So now you can see, you can view the inspection in our record. You can see the answers that the user gave. But you'll notice some of the fields are not all the way filled out. And we have like a paint work order number and a maintenance work order number and an inspection status waiting for inspection. So these have not been processed yet. And that's what we're going to let Nash do for us. So let's get out of here. And so remember, this is our record. So we're going to zoom into this and then we'll come back to it in just a minute. So let's go back into Nash. And ordinarily you would have Nash process this automatically. But what we're going to do now is we're going to process it manually. It can be scheduled if you want, but we'll just hit the play button here so that we can get the newest records. And there we go. So output 1, remember, is our paint work order. If we look back here on in the workflow a little bit more, here's output 1 was the paint work order. And then output 2, we can scroll down here, was our corrective maintenance work order in Maximo. So if you look in the status logs, you see on that fire hydrant record, we've got waiting for approval, the priority is 3, it's a corrective maintenance work order to paint the hydrant. And then output 2, we've got another work order created for deteriorated bonnet bolts. And we're doing that with 2 separate work orders because we may have different groups doing those kinds of activities. So 2233 is the paint work order number. 2234 is the corrective maintenance for the bonnet bolts. And that's it. The work order or the workflow is complete. And so we could go into Maximo. Let's go look at that. And I think it was 2233. Okay, so that was the poor paint condition, and that was just created. And then if we look up 2234, there's the deteriorated bonnet bolts. So we got the 2 work orders with the asset number assigned, and Maximo is complete. But now we also want a closed loop, right? So if we go back and look at Nash, let's close our log window. And you can see that after all the questions are said and done, we create the paint work order, and then we ask if there needs to be a corrected maintenance work order based on these other answers, and the answer was yes in our case because of the bonnet bolts. Oop. And let's close this. And then we have that new corrected maintenance work order gets created, and then we're also pushing something back to GIS, the inspection output and the hydrant output with the status. So we're sending the work order number back to GIS, and we're sending the inspection status back to GIS. So if we go back and look at collector, remember this was the record that we were looking at. So let's click here, and you'll notice now that it's a red color because the status has been changed. So the inspection status is now maintenance required. And if we go back in and we look at the inspection, we're showing that the paint work order number is 2233 and the maintenance work order number is 2234. So the user who did this inspection can go follow up and see what happened in Maximo. So there's the closed loop. That's how it works. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer more, but thanks for taking the time to watch this today. Thanks.